Good evening, everyone. Welcome to this event today. And it's a pleasure to be here for all my colleagues who are in India. Good evening for everyone else in the rest of the world. Good morning and good afternoon. My name is Sapna Kedia, and I work with the International Center for Research on Women. This event has been brought together by ICRW and by our colleagues from Nirantar. We've been working together over the past 6 months to develop this very fascinating framework for working on masculinities. And today sort of marks a big threshold and a big movement in that process where we are sort of opening up the development of the framework to everyone who's joined here with us in the event today. We would love to share with you our progress, our intention, and we'd love to hear from all of you about what you think and your thoughts on what the work that we are all very passionate and we're all very committed to. So, today, this is a 2-hour event. We end at 8:30 p.m. India time. And the event is divided into panel and also followed by a group discussion. In the beginning, we have with us our colleague Mohit. Mohit is a researcher at ICRW. He's a researcher, he's an activist, and he's very passionate about the intersectionality, gender, and education. Mohit will take us through the rationale and methodology of this work, followed by my dear colleague Hemlata, who's a senior technical specialist at ICRW. Hemlata will be taking us through the framework in the form that we have it now. This is work in progress based on some discussions we had with her and based on some literature that we put together in the past couple of months. That will be followed by a panel discussion for half an hour. I will introduce the panelists right before the panel. We'll then break into group and the group will have it's an open discussion. Please join the groups, participate. If you want, please just listen in. Then we'll come back here a little bit about the discussion, larger groups, hear from the audience and hear from our panelists and close the event. So that's the flow of today. Some housekeeping announcements. We are facing some challenges with our ट्रांसलेशन पे एंड मुझे मालूम है कि हमारे काफी सारे साथी स्पीकिंग है और सुनना चाहते हैं आज के इवेंट के बारे में तो हमारे साथी है रौनक जो चैट में ट्रांसलेट करते रहेंगे जो भी हमारी बातचीत हो रही है और बीच बीच में मैं भी ट्रांसलेट करूंगी वी विल कीप ट्रांसलेटिंग into Hindi in the chat box. So everyone, you see a lot typing in the chat box. Please bear with us because our back-end translations are not working well. Please type in your questions in the chat box too. Our panelists, our team members, and I also from the audience engage and answer questions and participate and have discussions in the chat box. I think that's about it. You're all on mute. Please help us in creating this, making this space. So over to you, Mohit, for the presentation on our rationale and methodology. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Sapna. Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening, one and all. My name is Mohit Dodeja. I'm going to take you through the introduction, rationale, and methodologies and objective of a study that we have done so far on developing this feminist framework to engage men and boys in work on masculinity. So, gender transformative approaches that question and address the gender norms and involve men and boys are key to transforming the power relations between men and women. Over the past decade, it has been noticed that there's a growing body of work that recognizing male engagement as the key strategy of achieving gender equality. While male engagement programming started with the support to the prevention of violence against women and girls and contamination of HIV/AIDS in the 1980s and 1990s, its scope has expanded in the recent years to include other domains of women empowerment and gender equality. At the same time, the rationale and approach for engaging men and boys are also evolving. From being solely positioned as obstacles to women's empowerment, men are now partners, stakeholders, and co-beneficiaries. Hence, they must be engaged to support women's empowerment and achieve gender equality and justice for all. With the development principle of leaving no one behind, another emerging concern is the intersection of gender inequalities with the other forms of marginalization. The recognition of intersecting inequalities has surfaced to the need to attend individuals and groups experiencing multiple forms of marginalization. They include those marginalized due to their ethnicity, caste, ability, age, class, gender identity, sexual orientation, and geographical location. Thus, while working with men and boys to challenge gender norms, it is very important to acknowledge the overlapping identities, context, and the intersectionalities occupied by men. And to remember that not all men share one single experience of power and privilege. However, the growing body of work on engaging men and boys is enough to define the roles in the transformation of gender relations. Few programs have also demonstrated how individual attitudes, behaviors can lead to a broader, sustainable shift in the institutional, structural practices, policies, and community norms. Furthermore, efforts to engage men and boys have largely been isolated pockets within the civil society networks and the organizations. However, focused on diverse themes such as education, sexual and reproductive health, and violence prevention. Men and boys must be engaged without instrumentalizing them as pathways to women's empowerment or marginalizing women and girls in the process. Organizations, alliances, and networks on men and gender equality need to base their work firmly within the feminist analysis. This work needs contextualized, where men and boys and masculinities are approached from an intersectional lens, which acknowledges both the power and the privilege, and also the powerlessness and the marginalization. The focus should be on promoting the idea that men can be agents of change, can work together with women and other men to drive gender equality, while holding them accountable and becoming conscious of their own locations within the gendered power inequality. Keeping this in mind, it is crucial to develop an intersectional feminist framework that can be used for working with boys and men on masculinity. Hence, the International Center for Research on Women and Nirantar, a center for gender and education, are working together to develop this feminist framework for working on masculinities within the context of India. The framework will be developed by drawing learnings from feminist networks, the South Asia Men Engaged Network, feminist research, and the policy advocacy networks and bilaterals. Going further to the objectives of the study, I would like to share that the purpose of this study is to guide the programs and policies on involving men and boys for gender equality, to adopt a gender transformative approach which is rooted in the feminist thought and the paradigm. Going beyond, I'll also share the methodologies that we have been adopting so far and we plan to adopt further. And this includes undertaking a preliminary literature review based on the desk research. This has already started and we have come to this point through the literature review and the discussion so far. Conducting key informant interviews of stakeholders such as organizations, researchers, and academicians working on issues of men and masculinities and gender equality. Constituting a project advisory committee meeting to guide the ICRW and Nirantar team to identify key resource material and the persons to engage with. An introductory consultation with experts from the feminist network and brainstorming workshops on the key feminist and intersectional principles for working on masculinities in India and to develop an initial outline for the framework. There will be small working groups meetings to develop reviews and to finalize the framework. And then presenting the framework to policymakers, the final framework will be presented and concrete steps will be identified to advocate for the framework and share it with the policymakers, especially in the Indian states. So there are a few states where the organizations that are included, that is ICIW and Nirantar, have a presence, such as Uttar Pradesh, Delhi, Rajasthan, and Bihar. So here we will be getting in touch with the policymakers in the Indian states. Then global sharing of the framework through an online event comprising of workshop of 2 hours to guide the global audience to develop a framework on similar lines for their context and how they can align the framework globally. So I will now hand over the stage to my colleague Hemlata, who will be taking you through the framework and the learnings from the literature review so far. Over to you, Hemlata.
Sorry, Mohit. Thank you. Hemlata, before you begin, I just wanted to let our audience know about the translation service. On the right-hand side, on your screen, on the top right-hand side, you will see a button called Live. If you click on that, you see something called Custom Live Streaming Service. If you go there and click on that, you can see the translation of this conversation in Hindi. आपके स्क्रीन में ऊपर राइट हैंड साइड कोना में लाइव का एक बटन होगा, उस पे अगर आप क्लिक करेंगे तो कस्टम लाइव स्ट्रीमिंग सर्विस आएगा, उस पे क्लिक करेंगे तो वो आपको एक दूसरे लिंक पे ले जाएगा जहां हम जो भी बातचीत कर रहे हैं वो हिंदी में आ रहा है. तो मैं बस वो बताना चाहती थी. सॉरी हेमलता, ओवर टू यू.
Thank you, Sapna, and thank you, Mohit, for setting the context for today's conversation. And I begin by mentioning, as Mohit has already mentioned, that this work is a work in progress, and whatever we are talking today is something that we have learned collectively from the experiences of work happening on ground, from the historicity of work done by the feminist movement, the women's movement, and all the gender identities that have been people from gender identities who've been part of this entire learning process over the years, and including researchers and scholars. And this document or the framework that we're talking about will continue to be a work in progress, to be informed by you all and various other voices which you would also help us suggest need to be included here and amplified further to make it inclusive and contextually applicable to a larger area of work. So to begin with, here, this work that we are putting forth today, this is informed by, as I mentioned, by scholars who were working on masculinities and also scholars working on feminism, as well as the experiences coming from ground, from analysis of different programs that have been based on masculinities and the idea to promote gender equality. The initial work on masculinities began by analyzing that feminism must, by definition, desire the end of systemic male dominance. Domination apparently was initially understood to be the largest part of what it means to be a man. And there grew an increasing need to identify the attitudes and practices among men that perpetuate gender inequality, involving both men's domination over women and the power of some men over the other, often the minority groups of men. As the work progressed, the perspective on masculinities kept getting informed from a feminist lens, and the construction of masculinity, we learned, is rooted in patriarchal structures and puts restrictive expectations. It impacts men and persons of all gender who may practice masculinity. However, the power and privileges bestowed on the concept of masculinity are disproportionate to restrictions. And thus, it is important to fix accountability, as my colleague Mohit already mentioned. Going on to how here, by this time, the work on masculinity actually moved from the concept of just one form of masculinity to the plurality of masculinities, this is a critical juncture where we see that the intersectional lens of working on masculinities came in, which was heavily built on learnings from the feminist literature, feminist work. So the work on masculinity, masculinities, thus, it needs, the idea is that it should disrupt binary and restrictive understandings of gender to push for reconstruction and transformation of all masculinities. And it should allow for a broad range of gender expression and identities to exist. So we need dialogue spaces which are focused to analyze on how gay men and trans men inhabit and perform hegemonic masculinities, or how queer women may reinforce hegemonic masculine norms. So women's centers also need to continue to understand gender beyond the binary to include trans, non-binary, and masculine of center experiences. Thus, the demand to make this work more accountable to feminist principle arises. And that is where we are trying to develop this framework and see we can meet that need in some way, again, collectively, learning together. So we try to see how the feminist framework tries to solve the problem of whether or not the work on masculinities can be situated within a feminist work framework, and how much, as we progressed over the past years, how much could the work be situated within the feminist framework. So here we try to put few feminist principles which have emerged over the years, and we have tried to unpack them. What do they mean for the work on masculinities or for promoting gender equality by working on masculinities, and how can we apply them? The application part has also come from review of various programs. So when we look at the principle of power analysis, it would mean to create resources and opportunities and an enabling environment that could address the power dynamics between genders. Role of childhood sensitization in boys, internalization of masculinity, of masculine dominance, need to be addressed by attending to how power is practiced. One manner to do this is men and people of all gender who practice masculinity need to analyze how they exercise their power in order to dismantle the masculine dominance as partners and allies. When we come to the social transformation of gender roles, this principle, how we understood is the programs which are addressing gender equality need to be socially transformative in terms of shifting the power balance or the dynamics. They should be able to impact that and thus transform gender roles. And this can be done through conscious social and political action, which we have seen historically has been a major move that took forward the work for gender equality. Then we come to the principle of having intersectionalities approach. We need to acknowledge that intersectionalities of all genders, not just looking at binaries, as gender is not a homogeneous category. We all agree, I think by now, with that. But it is related to race, class, caste, religion, which I just saw that Srilata raised this issue that we should be talking about religion also as a key category of where intersectionalities comes in. And the global location, the regions where we all are, the barriers of language that we all speak. But gender is related and the programs focusing on masculinity should move beyond the binary and biological notions of masculinity and beyond the heteronormative concept of gender. So instead of viewing men as wielding universal dominance, we need to acknowledge a plurality of masculinities, where different masculinities stand in different relationship to power. Finally, coming on to the last three principles, which as of now stand out for us clearly coming out from this work. But as I said, these don't stop here. We need to define deeper understanding of how do we move forward, how do we unpack these principles, and have more ways of working, or maybe like even breaking out from a box of just having a particular framework, but allowing people to come up with their own frameworks, yet locating them within the larger ambit of feminist principles. So on the privilege and patriarchy, so we found that the need for men is to not just change individually, but address wider patriarchal structures at play. The movement to dismantle patriarchal power must include men, so long as they are able to acknowledge the injustice of their own historical privileges as males, and to recognize the ongoing ideologies and economic, political, and social structures that keep this privilege in place. And thus the need to fix this accountability that with the restrictions that the patriarchal structure puts also on men to conform to certain norms, it also gives a certain amount of disproportionate power for which the accountability needs to be fixed. Coming to the personal and political, the idea of what personal is political, we need to confront the issues related to biological reproduction, sexuality, labor, rape, sexual violence, domestic violence, and sexual harassment. This needs to be done by transformation of social structures and individuals as well, through conscious and social political action for larger liberation of all genders, people of all genders, specifically also women and girls who have been always disproportionately marginalized. And finally, the transformation of state institutions. This is one area of work and like one principle that need to inform all types of work going forward. And this need to be done by changing laws, rethinking childhood socialization, where we actually look at the institutions of family, how do we redefine norms there, dismantle the masculine notions, the harmful masculinities, and look at it in schools where children are also socialized. So these are the institutions, and examining the gendering of media, the state, and various professions, how it is fostered through the education system. So to ensure incorporation of this feminist principle in the work, programs focusing on gender equality need to address social norm change at systemic level, and it needs to, the entire work needs to acknowledge the importance of social norm change right from day one, or right from the first word we write it on paper about gender equality. So over to the panel now. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you, Hemlata. And thank you, Mohit, for taking us through the effort that we've been trying to do for the last 6 months and highlighting some very important principles. I can see that in the chat box, also a lot of our participants are engaging with these concepts, and they agree with us, and they're also pushing us to think more in terms of all of these issues. So thank you so much. Without further delay, I'd now like to introduce our panelists. We're very proud to have all our panelists today. I'll begin by introducing Cristina Furtado. Cristina is the Executive Director at Equal Community Foundation in Pune. Equal Community Foundation has been working on masculinities and primarily works as a technical capacity building partner on many programs. Their objective is to raise every boy in India as gender equitable. Welcome, Christina, to the panel. It's an honor. I'd love to welcome Yogesh Ji from Vikalp Sanstha in Rajasthan. Vikalp Sanstha works on programs of gender equality. They work at the grassroots for ending gender-based violence. They work for ending child marriage, and they work on masculinity. Very warm welcome to you, Yogesh Ji. I'd love to welcome Diti. Diti is a queer trans-masculine researcher and activist. She's over the past decade, she's been a part of several queer, feminist, and student movements across India. Diti is currently doing his PhD from TIS on queer citizenship and nationalism. Welcome, Diti. I'd love to welcome Archana. Archana is a director at the Nirantar Center, Feminist Center for Gender and Education. And Archana has been working very closely with us on developing this framework. It's a pleasure to have you here, Archana, and we're looking forward to what you have to say. Our next panelist is Rituparna Bora. Hi, Ritu. Welcome to the panel. Rituparna is the co-founder of Nazariya, a queer feminist resource group. They run counseling centers for LGBTQIA communities, and they work with the queer and trans community. Welcome, Ritu. And finally, we have Pranita Achut from ICRW. Pranita is the Director of Research and Programs at ICRW, and Pranita looks after our measurement and evaluation. She's been behind a lot of our flagship programs at ICRW. So a very warm welcome to all of you. I'm very excited for this conversation. And unfortunately, we don't have a lot of time, but we'll try to make the most of the time that we have. So I think, Christina, I will begin with you. Like I said in my introduction, the ECF works on masculinities on the ground. So, I think it's befitting to start the conversation with you and perhaps to know from you, when you work on gender equality, why is it important to work on issues of masculinities? And when you're doing that, what are the challenges to make sure that that work is feminist? So some thoughts on that, Christina, and each panelist has 5 minutes. Christina, you've asked me to interrupt you if you overshoot 5 minutes, so please be warned. Over to you, Christina.
Thank you. Thank you, Sapna, and good day to everyone. Thank you for joining us from different parts of the world. It's really nice to see many friends in the audience. If I had the time and if Sapna let me, I would like to say hello to each of you individually, but I have been warned. So, of course, thank you to ICRW and Nirantar for organizing this panel, and thank you for inviting ECF to join this discussion. So to your question, Sapna, I think we'll take it in two parts. So why is it important to work on masculinities while working on gender equality? From ECF's point of view, first, we believe that in order to achieve gender equality, we have to make all the parties to the equation a part of the conversation. And people of all genders have to be included in this discussion and made a part of this process. Second, we believe that in order to achieve gender equality, we have to transform gender norms shaped by patriarchy. In order to bring about this transformation, men and boys also need to have the opportunity to understand how patriarchy and socialization shapes and defines their notions of who they should be and how they should behave. Third, we have to break the myth that feminism or gender equality is a zero-sum game, and that more for women and girls and people of all genders means less for men and boys, right? So this belief often gets manifested as backlash on women and girls and people of other genders who exercise agency. So we have to build a shared understanding of how equality can lead to better outcomes for everyone. Finally, patriarchal gender norms and intersectionalities create a set of pressures and stressors for men and boys and people who practice masculinities as well. And they should have the opportunity to reflect on who they would like to be and work towards achieving that specific masculinity. So now coming to the second part of your question, how do we involve men and boys in this work without compromising on feminist principles? There are a few key lessons we have learned along the way, and these have come to form pillars of our programming with adolescent boys. I'll just walk you through a couple of them. So first, it's important to believe that men and boys can change and want to change. So they are not naturally inclined towards violent and discriminatory behavior. And by promoting socialization into equitable norms and behavior from a young age, we can ensure that every boy has the opportunity to grow up to be non-violent and non-discriminatory. Our programs are also rooted in the human rights approach. So our starting point is that human rights are the basic rights that every person needs in order to lead a happy and fulfilling life. And it's our duty to stand up for each other's human rights. So irrespective of your relationship, or women and girls and people of all genders are human beings first, who are entitled to their human rights. Next, we refer to our participants as allies, not perpetrators or champions or heroes. So we're always conscious about not reinforcing power hierarchies and these notions of providers and protectors. And we're always working together to ensure that everyone can access their basic human rights. So next, we believe that gender equality is not just a woman's issue. It affects people of all genders, including men and boys. So it's important to create spaces for them to reflect on their own experiences related to notions of patriarchy, power, masculinity, gender norms, and for them to develop their vision of how gender equality can benefit themselves as individuals. We also firmly believe and constantly reiterate that our programs should and will always complement programs for women and girls and people of all genders and not replace them. And we also ensure that our programs incorporate the voices of women and girls. Finally, at an implementation level, we focus on designing activities that foster critical thinking, problem solving, and communication skills so that participants can reason and arrive at solutions and action plans independently. So we do our best to respect the lived experiences of our participants. We create a platform for them to reflect on those experiences, and we recognize that our role is not to instruct, but to facilitate a participatory process and discussion. So to conclude, I would like to say that using rights-based language, focusing on transforming norms, dismantling hierarchies, using inclusive and participatory methods, creating safe spaces for reflection, these are some of the steps that we have taken to adhere to feminist principles. Thank you, Sapna.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Christina. And you finished before time, and you were so succinct and you were so crisp, and you highlighted some very important points. I loved what you said about men and boys being allies, not being champions, not being perpetrators, not being heroes. And I also absolutely appreciate what you said about action plans and depending on lived experiences and not overlooking them. So thank you so much. I'd now like to welcome Yogesh Vaishnav. Yogesh ji, welcome to the panel. Yogesh ji, we've been working together, and I know that आप keen है to share जो विकल्प राजस्थान में काम करता है ग्रास रूट लेवल पे, उसमें क्या challenges है जब masculinities पे हम start करते हैं काम करना? What are the challenges of working on masculinities at the grassroots? And also you said you'd love to share your personal experiences. एक मर्द होने के नाते इस space में काम करना, इसको continuously question करना, ये कैसा रहा आपके लिए अनुभव और क्या आप लोगों के challenges हैं ground पे?
थैंक यू सपना, थैंक यू सो मच। और इस पैनल के सभी साथी जो अभी तक बात किया है, बहुत सारी चीजें जो है कि ऑलमोस्ट एक जैसी होती है जब अपन काम करना शुरू करते हैं, और चुनौतियों के तौर पे बहुत अलग अलग होता है। लेकिन मैं बात शुरू करूंगा जहां से हमने आज से 18-19 साल पहले जब बात करना शुरू किया कि हम लड़कों पुरुषों को जोड़ेंगे। सबसे पहली चुनौती तो हमारे आसपास के लोग, जो लोग जिन सेक्टर में हम काम कर रहे हैं, वही लोग हम लोगों से बड़ा वो करते थे कि जो महिलाओं के साथ लंबे समय से काम कर रहे हैं वो मेरे सामने देख के बोलते, अच्छा अब जाके पुरुषों को हाथ जोड़ के बोलना पड़ेगा कि भाई साहब हिंसा मत करो। सो जो इस तरीके की चुनौती वाले माहौल में लड़कों पुरुषों को जोड़ना एक बड़ी चुनौती उस दौरान रही। दूसरा था कि जब विकल्प ने काम करना शुरू किया, तब से लेके अब तक हमने अपनी जर्नी में बहुत सारे नए-नए मतलब सीखने सिखाने की प्रक्रिया हुई। जब हमने जेंडर को समझा और जब हमने बात शुरू किया, तो हम लोगों की जो हमारी टीम थी छोटी, और हमारे दिमाग में है कि लड़कियों महिलाओं के सशक्तिकरण के लिए काम करेंगे। तो मेरा सवाल था कि जब हम उनको सशक्त करेंगे तो क्या करेंगे? वो सशक्त होके वो लड़की, वो महिला क्या करेगी? तो उनका जवाब होता था कि वो अपने राइट को असर्ट करेगी। सो मेरे मन में हमेशा आता था कि यदि वो असर्ट करेगी, तो ये असर्शन उसकी जिंदगी में हमेशा रहेगा। तो उसकी जिंदगी में शांति, सुकून या चैन या अपन न्याय बोलें, तो ये कब आएगा? तो फिर बात आई पूरी चर्चा के बाद में, इसका मतलब जो जो और सेक्शन है, जिसके ऊपर ये भार है कि वो हिंसा करता है, वो प्रेशर करता है, वो अपने पावर को एक्सरसाइज करता है, वो पितृसत्ता को बनाए रखने का पूरा वो है। तो फिर लड़कों पुरुषों के जुड़ाव की बात हुई। तो ये शुरुआती मामला था। तो हमारे दिमाग में भी ये था कि लड़कियों महिलाओं पर हिंसा खत्म करने के लिए लड़कों पुरुषों को जोड़ो। तो इसका मतलब हुआ कि हमने एक इंस्ट्रूमेंट की तरह से उसको सोचा और जब काम करना शुरू किया। लेकिन कुछ दिन बाद ही हमको समझ में आया कि ये गलत अप्रोच है, ये सही मामला नहीं है, इसमें बदलाव की जरूरत है कि कैसे ये साथी पूरी जेंडर इक्वलिटी की कॉन्सेप्ट का हिस्सा बने, कैसे पितृसत्ता को चुनौती देने वाले लोग बने, कैसे ये साथी लोग पूरे माहौल में एक इस तरीके का सेफ एनवायरनमेंट बना सके, एक इकोसिस्टम क्रिएट कर सके। तो फिर हमको लगा कि एंगेजिंग मेन एंड बॉयज का एक अलग तरीके से समझ है। तो ये वो जगह थी जहां से हमने आए। तो इसका मतलब मैं समझ रहा हूं कि, और फिर जब हमने और एनजीओ के साथ काम किया, तो सेम तरीके से ग्रास रूट लेवल पे अभी बहुत सारी साथी लोग ये चाहते हैं कि लड़कों पुरुषों का जुड़ाव हो, लेकिन अभी तक वो समझ, वो पर्सपेक्टिव जो है, वो अंडरस्टैंडिंग जो है, उसकी अभी जरूरत है। तो एक चुनौती यदि बड़े लेवल पर काम करने के लिए जाते हैं, तो एक जगह आता है। दूसरा जो है कि ये बहुत मुश्किल है जहां पर इसके काम को आगे लेके जाना, लेकिन इसमें मजा आता है मुझे व्यक्तिगत तौर पे। लेकिन क्यों मुश्किल लगता है कि इसके परिणाम को समझना अपने आप में एक बहुत ही चुनौतीपूर्ण है। जल्दी परिणाम नहीं आएंगे, क्योंकि ऐसा इशू है कि हर व्यक्ति के लिए एक अलग तरीके की परिभाषा है। उसके लिए मर्दानगी की, उसके लिए पितृसत्ता की, उसके लिए उसके प्रिविलेज की, उसके लिए उसके जो पावर मिल रहा है उसके लिए उसकी अलग 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 तरीके की परिभाषा हर व्यक्ति की अलग है। तो फिर ऐसे में व्यक्ति के अंदर बदलाव, फिर उसके बिहेवियर में बदलाव, फिर स्ट्रक्चर में बदलाव, और वो बदलाव जो है वो इंस्टीट्यूशनलाइज करना है। ये जो यात्रा है अपने आप में बहुत ही चुनौती भरी है। तो इसके अंदर समझना कि कहाँ पर क्या बदलाव देखना चाहते हैं, वो आपके प्रोग्राम के स्तर पर तय करना एकाएक थोड़ा मुश्किल होता है। जब हम इम्प्लीमेंटेशन में जाते हैं तो इतने सोशल नॉर्म्स, इतनी तरीके की धारणाएं, इतनी तरीके के अलग अलग लोगों की बातें, वो हमेशा आमने सामने टकराती है। तो वो टकराहट में, यानी कि आपका बहुत सारा समय जो है इस काम में, उस क्राइसिस को मैनेज करने, उनको डील करने, उनको समझाने में जा रहा है, बजाय कि आपको उनको तैयार करना, उनको अकाउंटेबल बनाना, नए बिहेवियर को गढ़ना, ऑल्टरनेटिव बिहेवियर्स की परिभाषा को तैयार करना। ये एक चुनौतीपूर्ण उसमें पूरे माहौल के अंदर लगता है। दूसरा मुझे जो समझ में आता है कि जब कभी ये काम करने के लिए जाते हैं, तो दूसरे जो काम है, यानी महिलाओं के सशक्तिकरण की बात करो, लड़कियों के अंदर दूसरे बातों की बात करो, या और तरीके की जितने भी काम है, उसका एक एक एनवायरनमेंट है। अभी उनके लिए एक डेटाबेस है अपने पास, उससे जुड़े हुए बहुत सारे रिसर्च हैं, अ, कई तरीके की रणनीतियां हैं, जो जिनमें कौन सी जगह पे हम अटक जाएंगे, कौन सी जगह पे नहीं अटकेंगे, कौन सी चीजें हमने काम ले ली, उसको स्केल अप करने के लिए हमारे पास बहुत सारे। लेकिन इस वक्त में ज्यादा अभी इनमें इस तरह के काम में मर्दानगियों के समझने, और उसको जैसे अभी हेमलता जी भी बता रही कि कैसे हमने मर्दानगी की बात कर रहे हैं और अब वो मर्दानगियों में बदल रहा है, और इसके अलग अलग नजरिए हैं, अलग अलग पर्सपेक्टिव है। तो उसको समझना और उसको हर काम में लेके आना एक्शन में, और फिर उसके बदलाव को जांचना, ये अपने आप में बहुत बड़ा चुनौतीपूर्ण शायद हमारे सामने रहा। और ये एक लॉन्ग टर्म इंटरवेंशन की मामला है। अभी तक इसको समझना मुश्किल हो रहा है। तो लॉन्ग टर्म इंटरवेंशन के लिए जो तैयारी चाहिए, जो रिजोर्स चाहिए, वो अभी कहीं पर भी चुनौती बना हुआ है। सो ये एक है। तीसरा जो मुझे बड़ी चुनौती अभी तक महसूस हुई, वो है कि लोगों ने अभी पॉलिटिकली राइट होना, वो करेक्ट होने की बात करना सीख लिया। तो अब जब हम जाते हैं उनके साथ बात करते हैं, तो वो उस वक्त आपके सामने बोलेंगे, लेकिन पीछे से एक अलग तरीके की चीजें सामने आएगी। जैसे उदाहरण के लिए अभी अभी हमने एक यंग मैरिड गर्ल के साथ जो रिसर्च किया और उसमें यंग मैरिड बॉयज को जोड़ा, उसके अंदर लगभग 100% लड़कों ने ये स्वीकार किया, शादीशुदा लड़के थे ये 19 से 21 साल की, कि वो समानता को समझते हैं और वो जानते हैं और चाहते हैं कि समानता हो। उनकी समानता की अपनी परिभाषाएं थी। लेकिन जब थोड़ी आगे बात किया तो उसके अंदर से करीब 82% लोग ऐसे थे जो ये कहते हैं कि हिंसा जायज है कभी कभार घर परिवार की इज्जत बचाने के लिए महिलाओं पर, और 41% ने ये बोला कि यदि छोटे मोटे काम ऐसे होते हैं उनसे जिसमें उनको मार खाना होता है। तो ये एक है। एक तरफ वो बोल रहे थे करीब 92% लोग ऐसे बोले कि लड़कियों महिलाओं में ऐसी स्किल होनी चाहिए जहां पे वो जाके काम कर सके, पैसा कमा सके। लेकिन वहीं पर वही लोग जब थोड़ा फर्दर बात कर रहे थे तो 60% ऐसे लोग निकल के आए जिन्होंने ये बोला कि वो अपने से खर्चा नहीं करना चाहिए। सो अब अपन देख रहे हैं कि अलग जगह, एक जगह पे जब आप बात कर रहे हैं और दूसरी जगह पे दूसरी चीजें कर रहे हैं, तो ये जो 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 आपको तारतम्य बिठाना है, जो बात करनी है, इसके अंदर एक चुनौतीपूर्ण माहौल नजर आता है। जो मुझे चौथा और बड़ा चुनौती मुझे लगता है कि जब हम देख रहे हैं, समझ रहे हैं कि पैट्रियार्की को समझने के लिए, जेंडर नॉर्म्स को समझने के लिए जाति, धर्म, वर्ग, राष्ट्रवाद, यौनिकता, ये इतने शेड हैं जिसके अंदर हम जाके उसको समझना है। सेम तरीके से मस्कुलिटीज को भी इन सब शेड में समझना और इनके लिए एक्शन को प्लान करना और फिर हमको आगे जाके इनकी रिजल्ट आधारित चीजें तैयार करना, एविडेंस क्रिएट करना, ये अपने आप में बहुत बड़ा चुनौतीपूर्ण है। पांचवा जो मुझे लगता है कि अभी तक इतने सालों के काम करने के बाद भी मैंने खुद ने और जगह पे ये मुश्किल से पा रहा हूं कि ऐसे एविडेंस जो पेट्रियार्की को चैलेंज कर रहे हैं, डेंट ला रहे हैं कहीं पर, वैसे एविडेंस अभी तक भी क्रिएट कर पाने में मुश्किलात हो रही है। तो ये एक चुनौतीपूर्ण है। और जो जैसे जैसे आगे बढ़ रहे हैं, फेमिनिज्म की समझ आती जा रही है, वो उसके अंदर आता है और फिर उसको डिफाइन करना, बताना मुश्किल हो रहा है, क्योंकि इसके लिए अभी भी अपने को भाषा, इसके लिए भी अलग तरीके की टर्मिनोलॉजी जो जरूरत है वो है। छठा जो बड़ा चुनौती जो मुझे साथ में समझ में आई कि हमने अभी तक जितनी चर्चाएं की, मैंने भी जितना काम किया या और भी हमारे साथियों ने काम किया, एक डेवलपमेंट सेक्टर का जो जगह है उस जगह पे काम किया, लेकिन उसकी बाउंड्री से बाहर जाते हैं। यदि हम पुलिस की देखते हैं, हम इंजीनियर्स का सेक्शन देखते हैं, बाजार का सेक्शन देखते हैं, विज्ञापन का देखते हैं, फिल्मों का देखते हैं, जो असल में इस पूरी सत्ता को बनाए रखने, स्ट्रक्चर को बनाए रखने के लिए मजबूती से वो कंट्रीब्यूट कर रहा है, तो उनके साथ चर्चा करने की भाषा अभी तक बन नहीं पा रही है। ये एक चुनौती मेरे लिए सामने समझ में आती है। तो ऐसे में अलग अलग जगह पे देखता हूँ और वो परेशानियां मुझे बहुत सारी मतलब उसके सामने दिखी। सो इस तरीके से चुनौती को देखते हैं। शायद वक्त की नजाकत को देखते हुए मुझे यहाँ पे रुकना चाहिए और अब मतलब जब चर्चा के बाद में फिर से आएंगे तो हम और आगे बात कर सकते हैं।
थैंक यू सो मच योगेश जी कि आपने इतने सारे पॉइंट्स बताए। मैं एक बार क्विकली आपके पॉइंट्स इंग्लिश में समराइज कर देती हूँ हमारे ऑडियंस के लिए। Yogesh ji spoke about several challenges to the work on masculinities in the ground. Firstly, he spoke about how challenging it is to include men and boys, right, in the first step. Second, how do you convince everyone that this work is important because it's long term, the impact? We can't see it in the short term. It takes a long time to see impact. So how do you include people in programs and on this work and convince them that it's going to show results? And I think a very, very important point about this contradiction between how masculinities means so many different things to people at an individual level. In my daily life, masculinities can mean so many different things. Then how to bring all of those together, how to develop strategies and to then change all of these things at an institutional level. That's very, very challenging. And another very crucial point that Yogesh mentioned was about how there's a lot of crisis management, there's a lot of firefighting, there's a lot of conflicts that's happening when this work happens, that the actual work of change and transformation often takes a back seat. And I think this problem, the next challenge, I think a lot of us perhaps are guilty of, is being politically correct. We'll be politically correct on platforms like this. We'll be nervous, so we want to say the right things. We don't want to upset anyone. But then when it comes to practicing, we do the opposite things. And he gave concrete evidence from the ground how people say something else. And when you collect evidence, they say violence is acceptable. finally spoke about intersectionalities, how difficult it is to bring in the intersectionalities of caste, class, ethnicity, religion, gender, sexuality. And then he said, we don't have enough evidence. We don't have evidence to show how working on masculinities and how to work on masculinities and intersectionalities together, how to bring in feminism together. It's all very complex. And I think a very important point, again made by Yogesh ji, that always it's the converted who are talking to each other. Development sector, we're always looking for people who are easy to change or over whom we have some power, some authority, some hierarchies there. It's difficult to crack the corporate sector. It's difficult to work with police. It's difficult to work with the education sector. And the language that we use is often very alienating. Very often for these events, we call our friends and family. They come, they see us, they are happy, and then they leave because they can't understand what we're speaking about. So the language is also a problem. Thank you so much, Yogesh ji, for all these important points. Diti, I'd like to come to you next. Thank you so much for being on the panel, and thank you for agreeing to share with us your personal experiences as a queer transmasculine person. Diti, I would request you to share with us your journey as a transmasculine feminist person, and how has masculinity sort of played out in your own experiences and in your work. Over to you.
Thank you, ICRW and Nirantar, for inviting me to be part of this esteemed panel and giving me the space to share about my personal journey. When we talk about men and boys, we rarely consider that there are men and boys who are not assigned male at birth and whose socialization into masculinity then takes a different trajectory. I am glad that during the presentation on the framework, it has been laid out very clearly that masculinity is not just embodied by people who are assigned male. I was assigned female at birth. I grew up as what was then known to me as a tomboy, and everybody called me a tomboy at that point in life. And I did not have access to the language of trans, so I also called myself a tomboy. I was perhaps one of the lucky few people who was not beaten up for being the way I am. I come from a relatively upper middle class, upper caste, educated and fairly liberal family, and nobody then told me that it was wrong. And I also didn't realize that I was perhaps a freak in the society. However, this is not the experience of most gender non-conforming people I know. My partner, who is a Bahujan trans man from rural Maharashtra, shares very different experiences. However, in the process of trying to associate with masculinity meant that I had also developed a sense of internalized misogyny. I prided on being different from the girls. I participated with my brothers and my guy friends when they made fun of girls and sexualized them, and I felt extremely happy when they saw me as one of them. As I entered into a college in Delhi, I realized that the tomboy could no longer fit in with friends and classmates. So at the age of 18, actually began my process of gendering as a woman. My hostel mates taught me how to be a girl. They tried to set me up with dates. On dates with boys, and as a migrant from Northeast, they also taught me how to fit into the Delhi crowd if I wanted to avoid being called chinky. That meant that I had to draw my eyes to look big, and I was instructed to wear kurtas as much as possible and get a Assamese boyfriend so that the Delhi boys didn't trouble me. While it didn't help me survive 3 years in Delhi, it also left a deep sense of discomfort with the city and also much trauma. It was also around perhaps the same time that I was introduced to feminism. And unfortunately, the feminism that I was introduced to saw in a very limited way men as the oppressor. Here, I was also taught that my desire to affirm my masculinity made me one of the oppressors. Many of my cis feminist friends and mentors made me feel ashamed of not being able to love my body, and despite the fact that a few queer feminists who were told me otherwise and shared their experiences with me, I felt guilty for the longest time to associate myself with masculinity and being a man. And a part of me still continues to live with that sense of guilt in identifying as a man or masculine. And it has taken me a long time to reconcile my gender identity with my feminism, and an even longer time to admit that I have a desire to physically transition into an image of masculinity. At the same time, I've not been able to find a space within the trans masculine spaces as somebody who is maybe more femme, gay, and feminist. In my experience, if I were to imagine a framework to work on masculinity from a feminist perspective, I think we need to move beyond associating masculinity with being assigned male at birth. Trans man, non-binary persons, and women too can be masculine, and masculinity affects us very different from how it affects cis men, cis women, and other femme people. Although there may be overlaps, as trans masculine people, we also imbibe much of the misogyny and toxicity while associating ourselves with masculinity, most times because we want the world to affirm our gender identity. However, we are not privileged by masculinity and patriarchy, or at least not in the same way as cis men are. Hence, reconciling my gender identity and feminism uh, has occupied and continues to occupy a big challenge in my personal life and my politics. My work has shown that cis men are marginalized by who are marginalized by caste, class, religion, ethnicity, sexual orientation, and ability too would be oppressed by the hegemonic masculinity. While for cis men who are non-normative in terms of their sexual orientation, the heteronormative family may be the primary site of oppression. On the other hand, for many other oppressed communities, the oppression is outside the natal family and the immediate community. It then becomes very important to look at how different sites and contexts do contribute in the shaping of the masculinity as well as the oppression. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Diti. I think I misgendered you earlier. I'm very sorry for that. Thank you so much for sharing your struggles about your gender identity and trying to be feminist enough and trying to the whole sort of challenge between wanting to be masculine and not associating with the masculinities that are often criticized by our feminist circles. Thank you so much for sharing that struggle and those challenges. We now move on to Archana. Archana, you've been part of Nirantar for a very long time, and you've been sharing with us during our discussions about what a journey it has been for Nirantar to finally reach a space where you think that, working with men and boys is important. So my question to you is about why is it, what do you think are the current gaps in the work on masculinities, especially from a feminist perspective, and why do you think it's important for this work to be feminist at all?
Thank you, Sapna. I will start with Sapna has been saying that we are trying to develop a framework, and I want to share with everyone that this framework is in no shape. The work has just begun. We just started, and the second wave of COVID came, and we could not really reach out to many people. So this is a very, very preliminary work, but we are actually looking at talking to feminists and having way more discussions amongst ourselves before we put out any framework or even any comprehensive understanding of the gaps and challenges of working on masculinity from feminist perspective. However, we do believe that it is important to work with masculinities and I think the challenge here is that how do we not just continue to work in the limited framework that is unfolding in many ways across the globe, but what are the new ways and what are the challenges or gaps in the present work on men and masculinity, men, boys, and masculinity. Actually, I find even this word quite problematic. So I will start with one statement from Strathern, and she says masculinity is not necessarily just about men. it is not necessarily just about relations between the sexes either. Rather, it is part of a system for producing differences. And I think this is important to capture, that masculinity and femininity, what is the culture, what is the location, what is the space, but they come out as two different set of experiences and different set of behavioral projections. So how do we look at these ideas in every context? And masculinity somehow gets very much attached to the exercise of power. And this exercising of power is not always against women. This basically, it's a power to control, to subdue, to discipline other. And that other could be anyone. So the masculinity draws its power from this idea of controlling. So who is, so when we say hegemonic masculinity, and we also say masculinities, because we are also saying that everyone is not equally powerful. There are studies and there are critiques which are also saying, just because there is an universal idea of patriarchy, that doesn't mean that all men are powerful and all women are powerless. So intersectionality has already given us that lens to look at the varieties in which this can be seen. But what is important, and I think what is not engaged enough in the discourse is the power relations between sexes and between genders. And as Foucault says, power is relational. So that if there is no absolute power, then this is also another reality, that there have been power struggles between different genders and different sexes all the time through the histories. But masculinity work does not engage enough with these struggles, where these so masculinity is not all powerful, is not all pervasive. There is no universal idea of who is masculine, who is feminine, and how do we even experience and project our masculinity and femininity. Because the other important aspect is that the way we become women, the masculinity is also learned. And I think there is a lot of work which has shown us that how this is developed over the time. Every culture has its own mechanisms and tools of making people feminine and masculine. So what are these cultural practices? And they are very different from each other. They are not just one. And even feminization is also not just linked to the sex. Feminization as contrast to masculinity. So when a upper caste man subordinates a Dalit man, is it the feminization of his masculinity? So everything that is subordinate is feminine. Are we saying that? Because even that language also is used. So how do we even understand masculinity and femininity? I think is a big question that we all have to start engaging. And everything that is soft is not feminine, and everything that is power, that is controlling, that is exercised to discipline others or to show power is masculine. And I think it's important here that even masculinity is exercised differently by different people. And I would, if I can say, cis men in different ways according to their location and according to their relationship with the person that they are engaging. Another thing, I think a lot of masculinity discourse also talks about, and I remember hearing S. Anandi also about this, there's a masculinity crisis going on at the moment. Because the way gender relations have transformed, the way women have started occupying certain spaces, now masculinity is in great crisis. So a lot of masculinity work seems to be really rescuing these men who are facing this crisis and helping them to adapt to the new world or to the new gender relations. And I feel this is deeply problematic. So instead of actually focusing at the structures and institutions and looking at the patriarchy as a larger structure needing transformation, we are constantly helping people to continue to survive the same structure, but in a better way. And that is why we have vocabulary like sensitive, real men are not like this, sensitive men or caring men. So these terminologies are used very often in the work around masculinity. And I guess this is something which needs our attention at the moment. Another thing, I think I have, maybe this is the last point I want to make, is that how we engage with the idea of psychosocial emotional aspects of masculinity, and have we engaged enough? If socialization is in the core of making men, women, and everyone, then how are we looking at these relations? Because a lot of socialization happens with mother. And the universal idea of actually that there is a one kind of masculinity and there's a one kind of femininity also in a way then calls to look at the relationship mother has with children, and what kind of socio emotional journeys that boys and girls have in their childhood, and what impact it has on then different ways in which men and women experience their femininity and masculinity. And one last thing is that masculinities are also challenging each other at different points in time. Like one example I gave earlier, what about the masculinity of father and son, and how do they relate with each other? And how this shifting of power and masculinity happens within one family. At one point of time, father has a masculinity and they control and they try to bring up boys in certain way, and when the same boy grows up, his masculinity becomes more important and he starts to control things at home. So how this shifting of masculinity and power within the home within a short span of time happens, and how much we have engaged with this phenomenon, which is almost global, the way these are happening at the moment. So I guess these are some of the questions that I am raising, but there are many more things to be discussed. There are many more ideas to be brought into the discourse of masculinity. And we will be very happy to, I mean, I am saying this with ICRW and Nirantar will be getting back to most of you to discuss them further. And it would really be very, very important piece of work that we are trying to do to problematize, not really for the sake, because we feel feminists have not engaged enough with the masculinity work, especially in the context of India, and how we can create a comprehensive framework which can help all of us to do our work better. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Archana. Rituparna, I'll immediately come to you in the interest of time. So Rituparna, my question for you was, how do you understand masculinities and how has this work informed your work with the queer and trans community and vice versa? How has both the work influenced each other?
Thank you so much for having me and Nirantar and ICRW. This is a very important discussion to have. And for me, so I am speaking about masculinity from a professional, personal experience. From being part of an organization which is queer feminist, but also my personal experiences of growing up as an indigenous cis woman from a very village community with mental illness and being taken care of an ailing old cis-het father. So I am posing certain questions and I have no answers to them, trust me, because I have been really thinking about those questions because of the kind of experiences that I hear on an everyday level, on the helpline or on when people call me and share about their experiences. So, and also if you have to reach out to me, I would really appreciate write to me instead of assuming that I am saying certain things. So it's better if you have a discussion. So certain questions that I really wanted to pose here is that, are we as the feminist movement afraid of the term masculinity? And what does it mean to be masculinity? For example, अगर हम किसी को बोले कि you are like a man, how does it equate with our understanding of femininity? Secondly, one of the questions that I would like to address is, why do we work with men? And when I'm saying men, I'm saying men in quotes. Do we work with men to be instruments of change for gender equality, or to reflect about privileges and disadvantages that this cis heteronormative patriarchal society also poses on various men? So for me, and also for women, so for me, it is very important to understand the concept of masculinity and men from as both oppressors and oppressed. So from trying to be like one of them, like working towards being like one, to actually critiquing the whole idea of men, and then now talking about various kinds of masculinities. Feminism has come a long way. In my experiences, when we have to talk about masculinity, we need to actually try and differentiate between different kinds of masculinity and see masculinity as a spectrum. So I'll give some examples here. So for instance, where I as a queer feminist activist and leading a queer life, I've seen that there are many queer people who are also the primary caregivers of their parents and of their fathers, cishet fathers. And how do cis men, old men, react to being the dependent of the pervert child, the queer child, who they have long way say that ये मेरे जिंदगी में belong नहीं करते हैं. And this happens for even queer and trans people, both queer and trans people, because I've seen many trans people who are taking care of their parents and their fathers, and how do these cis-het old men respond to the kinds of transgression that we as queer and the trans queer people and the trans community challenge this structure. Secondly, I'll also give you an example of people, of gender non-conforming people, who have come and spoken about the fact that because of femininity is being questioned so much, कि आप feminine क्यों हो? And trust me, in the women's movement, my femininity has been questioned a lot. Like, why are you wearing such kind of clothes? To being बहुत सारे feminist events में मेरे साड़ी तक ठीक करने का जो भी कोशिश रही है. So people have actually being very, even the women's movement is not uncomfortable with masculinity. They're also uncomfortable with femininity. So because femininity is seen in these narrow boxes, a woman, cis woman, or woman, female assigned at birth, people with small breasts, or women with PCOS are being questioned. So क्या होता है कि जब वो grow up करते हैं, for example, people with PCOS or people with small breasts, there's this feeling about कि मैं woman हूँ या man हूँ, मैं masculine हूँ या मैं feminine हूँ. So these questions are posed, and as my partner says, who identifies as a gender non-conforming person, she has struggled to be you know, like in her expression, she's very masculine presenting, but whenever I misgender her because of my Assamese thing, so I say karta hai, then she'll say, do not use karta hai, use karti hai for me. And this has posed a question about how important for her was to prove that she's not feminine, but she's not even masculine to that extent. So the spectrum of femininity and masculinity is definitely needs to be questioned. And also queer people, मुझे लगता है कि as queer people we have to question why कि हम men और boys के साथ क्यों काम करना चाहते हैं. क्योंकि वो for example, young men and boys who refuse to use condoms or who are violent, why are they violent? सिर्फ कॉन्डम यूज के बारे में बात करने से क्या होगा, और क्या हमको बात करना पड़ेगा how it impacts their masculinity, how it impacts the whole idea of fear, how it talks about fear, how it talks about shame, how it talks about various other issues relating to femininity and masculinity. It is also important to not pose femininity and masculinity as two different spectrums, because it is so important कि हम हमेशा लगता है कि अगर आप masculine नहीं है तो आप feminine हैं, और masculinity और femininity में हमको ना सिर्फ norms के बारे में बात करना चाहिए, we have to talk about expression, we have to talk about identities, and we have to talk about attributions as well. Because these aspects play a very important role in understanding our own ideas of masculinities. एक last point मैं बोलना चाहती हूँ, and I can come back to the questions later, is whenever we are talking about masculinity and femininity, I think it is important, जैसे योगेश जी ने कहा है कि हम बहुत politically correct जवाब देते हैं, and it is right, we do give politically correct answers. You go and work with people, you go and work with the queer community, you go and work with the trans community, say नहीं हम violence नहीं करना चाहिए, होना चाहिए, वो होना चाहिए. It is very important to understand the unconscious while we talk about masculinity and femininity, because हमारे कभी-कभी जो हम बात करते हैं ना, वो हमारे actions में नहीं नजर आते हैं, या हम जो सोचते हैं उसमें definitely नहीं नजर आते हैं. The conscious guilt, the conscious feeling of not being enough, the conscious feeling of not being able to do enough for the society, not being the conscious feeling of do I not fit into the structure, is something that impacts people across gender and across the masculinity and femininity spectrum. So I think to talk about masculinity, we need to have a critical understanding of femininity and how feminist movement have been viewing femininity and masculinity as two different spectrums. And others definitely, like Deepi and Yogesh and others, have talked about their own experiences of working with men or being trans-masculine persons and their struggles. So I wouldn't go into that aspect at all. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Ritu, so much for taking it to so personal and sharing your personal experiences of caregiving, challenges with language, and all your struggles. Thank you so much. We'd now like to move to our last panelist, Pranita. Pranita, you we want to talk a little bit about, because we run so many programs on norm change, on masculinities. We want to talk to you a little bit about, the current gaps in the measurement of gender norm change work. And even I was looking at our chat box, and Madhumita has pointed out there that, we don't want to bring in power, privilege, etc. in our measurement, right? So what are the current gaps, and do you think that these gaps can ever be addressed? How? And you have 5 minutes, Pranita. Thank you.
Thank you, Sapna. And it's really such an excellent panelist with a lot of open conversation. Um, it's a really a huge question, and I think, I mean, I'm coming last, and the question on the measurement, that in a way also shows the status of measurement in this whole conversation. And I think one of the panelists had raised that probably we don't have enough evidence in terms of what is really happening and what is transforming and what is not really transforming in that sense. So it's a really huge topic and huge question, but I'll just in the given time touch just a couple of points. One is about this whole feminist evaluation approach, and also this whole discussion around measurement of gender norms and gender attitude. It's like more comparative, the way we often look at and say, like, what is it that one should be really doing. uh, when we think about feminist evaluation approach, I really like it primarily because it doesn't really get into any type of step-by-step guidance on how to do evaluation, like probably also many other approaches. It's a method agnostic. The focus is primarily on informing the evaluator's thinking. Expect them to be aware and acknowledge that evaluation is a political activity, and as an individual, as an evaluator, their their own experiences, perspective, and characteristics come from the political standing that they have, and also that informs in a way the way they look at the studies. And you actually, we all can see that this is very visible in the way we design an evaluation, build our hypothesis, or even conduct any analysis or interpretation. And in a way it also uh, makes certain issues, or like, the way as an evaluator we highlight certain issues while keeping certain issues invisible. So, like, being very cognizant of this issue is critical when we are designing any evaluation, and seeing how we are really collecting data, analyzing and interpreting that. And one quick example I can give you is, I don't know, probably many of you must have seen our National Family Health Survey, which is one of the largest demographic survey being conducted in India every 5 years. In the household tool of round 5, there is a very specific question on, is, like, being asked to the head of the household about all the household members, that whether a particular person is male or female or transgender. One is that even in terms of Hindi translation, the term being used for transgender is like Vipreet Ling, which I am not really very comfortable with in terms of term. But also, this whole question just stops here. Like, the main study, the data which is collected is only with those men and women. So the people who really identifies themselves to be men and women, they are the one who are eligible to participate in the main data collection. And in that way, experiences of people who do not fit in gender binary are excluded from this largest data set, which is informing policies and programs. I'm not saying that there are no specific studies, but I think the point is that the main major studies, are they really capturing and representing experiences and voices of people who are not necessarily conforming to the gender binaries. And that same thing you'll see in many studies that are conducted around family planning, or even other fields. Uh, we have also seen that many studies, especially when you think about the data, or talk about the data, uh, there has been a definite shift from, like, really looking at just the total number to gender or sex desegregated data, like data for male and female separately. But I mean, even there, you'll find there are a lot of critical indicators which are still not providing sex desegregated data. I don't know if many of you may have or may not have seen that for even COVID related critical uh, clinical outcome indicators like hospitalization, testing, or even deaths, those are not available by sex desegregated in public domain, though we have data on vaccination. So so at that level, you see that, lot of we see the marginalization of people who do not conform by this gender binary. So that is definitely a major gap that we all have been seeing. The another issue is on in terms of the gender norms and the measurement of gender norms and attitude. My assessment is on that most of the programs uh, intends to change specific gender norms. So those are, like, often articulated as a long-term goal, and that we see also in terms of the program design and the strategies, and also the investments being made into it. So, like, the programs often consider socio-ecological framework, recognize uh, gender as a structural issue, but interventions primarily focus on the easily accessible population groups, individuals, adolescent girls and boys, young women and men, and also adults. But the focus is primarily on building individuals' understanding and skills to aspire, to negotiate their aspirations. And in that way, I would say the burden of change is primarily on them. And you can see that there is a lot of disconnect. So one side, we recognize that gender and injustice and discrimination is extremely structural, and there is all that intersection that all the earlier speakers spoke about. But when we do the intervention, our focus is on the, in a way, low hanging, easily accessible population. And at that level, then it becomes easy, I would say, easier or appropriate to measure the attitudinal change, to really see whether the program is able to bring the change in terms of the attitude of the individual who are the primary participants in the study. Because they may, that the work and the change at that level may not necessarily be enough, and it's most cases not enough, we know that, to really bring the change in the norm, the gender norm that we are talking about. So and given that there has been all those investment in at changing the attitude and the behavior of those individuals, there has also been some certain investments in terms of measuring gender attitude among adolescent or even adults. There has been some big studies quantitatively and also qualitatively to assess change in the gender attitude, and safely one can say that we have some good measures, good quantitative measures to indices to assess gender attitude and the change over time, which has shown association with other behavioral changes as well. So in that sense, it seems fine and relevant and important. But the moment you talk about norm change, I think there's still the bigger question is that, are programs really investing enough in bringing change in the norm? Have we really been engaging enough with community structures and systems which are I mean, we all know that it is very difficult. It requires intensive long-term investment at multiple levels, at policy, at legislation, at programmatic level to really shake and change fundamentals. And navigating with institutions are extremely challenging in that sense. The way what system considers appropriate and right may not be the way we really see as something that is necessary to change those norms. And like, in fact, when we were talking about GEMS curriculum on masculinities, faculties were not really comfortable even in using even the term like mardangi. So that's like, I would say somewhere they had the feeling is that, mardangi is associated with sex and sexuality. And we all know that how education system in a way is resistant to that area of work. So one is that about this whole thing that how program institutions are restrictive in that sense, and the effort that are necessary to really engage and work with these custodians of the systems and structures, which in a way is lacking at great to great extent in that sense, and there is a reason behind it. And to bring to one is to challenge these spaces of institution. We have to really in those spaces deconstructing and measuring norms is equally difficult, if not more difficult. We really heard about the complexity of norm, the of how gender and other axis of identities enable or disable people to exercise power and privileges, or again powerlessness or marginalization. And to really understand that that complexity, to unpack and understand, those are extremely necessary, but also requires a lot deep dive, requires resources, requires intention and ability to comprehend that complexity, which I would say in the time when there is a lot of emphasis on quick turnaround time, with little resources, I think we are still stuck with at times of 10% of the total program resource being put for measurement and evaluation. I think we really need a lot more effort and energy around that. So with that, I'll just stop here. Thanks.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Pranita, for highlighting some of the gaps in measurement and evaluation, and something like a national family health survey and how binary it is, and how it almost completely overlooks most of the aspects that we've been talking about this evening. Thank you so much. Unfortunately, we're delayed a lot and we don't have enough time for the group work. Earlier, we had planned 20 minutes for the group work, but now we'll probably move to around 10 to 12 minutes. Please bear with us. The group work may not be very detailed. The group discussion may not be very detailed, but please do contribute. Please do participate. And if you're unable to share your thoughts, please do reach out to us and we'll work with you. We'll respond to you and we'll include your thoughts in the framework. So what we begin with is I will split the group into 3 breakout rooms. Each group will have one moderator and a note taker. The note taker will take notes and come back and share with the larger group. So the first group is going to discuss what these feminist principles should look like, what are these frameworks, and some of the issues that we've been talking about since some time. The second group will focus on intersectionalities, and the third group will focus on evaluation. The assignment of participants will be random. Please give me a minute as I just create breakout rooms. The breakout rooms will be for around 10 minutes. We're just waiting for all participants to come back. Just give it another 10 seconds. We only have another 10 minutes of the event to go. So I would request all note takers to please keep the summary brief so that we have some time to get panelists' last remarks, if at all. And to the audience members, I request you to please leave your thoughts and comments on the chat box. And please do get back to us. Please write to us. So I think we'll begin with the first group. Mohit, could you quickly summarize in 2 minutes what was discussed in the first group? Thank you.
Sure. Thank you, Sapna. So there were discussions around what are the understandings around the work with men and boys on masculinity to become feminists. So some of us talked about how we need to address the anxieties of young men, and somebody suggested that for that we need to create informed community youth clubs to negotiate opposing force that are coming from family and other social institutions. And this will also help in empowering relationships and developing empathy to address the gender-based violence in different social environments. And then somebody talked about that even women practice toxic masculinity, and they come across a few cases where there were women who were victim of violence by their sister, by their sister-in-laws, or all that. So they say that it's very important that in our framework we need to address the toxic masculinity being practiced by women as well. And then the process of unlearning was talked about, that we really need to address that there has to be a focus on unlearning the existing social behaviors so that we do not unconsciously reproduce them. And then there was a focus on need to inaugurate a new language to address hegemonic masculinity, um, and the need to address the intersectional linkages to the power distribution. And then finally, we talked about that questions like being independent is associated with masculinity. So, and an example was also given that women with responsibilities love being called son of the home. So, such things need to be addressed within a framework that is feminist. That we need to shift from associating power with being masculine or being of a particular kind. So that was pretty much about it. I just quickly briefed what we discussed. Over to the next uh, note taker.
Thank you. Thank you, Mohit. So I was the note taker in the second group. What we mainly discussed was how, there is a lot of exclusion when you talk about intersectionalities. There are various areas where there's exclusion. When you look at sexual and reproductive health rights, if you're not intersectional enough, you're excluding a lot of people. When you talk about family planning, when you talk about rape laws, so we discussed some of the areas where there's so much exclusion and where masculinity, men are looked as perpetrators, everybody else is looked at victims, and that whole the language is completely one-sided. Then we spoke a little bit about methodologies. Interesting examples were shared around how sports for development was used to sort of bring girls together, and then accidentally how boys came together, then how there was some upper caste person cooking for everybody, a Dalit person cooking for everybody else. So work on intersectionalities can happen very consciously. It can sometimes happen unconsciously. So it's very important to keep that in mind and to remember how you're also unconsciously incorporating intersectionality in your work. So then it can be a little less daunting, because I know the past couple of hours we've been constantly talking about how challenging it is. The other very important thing is that working on intersectionalities can come around activities, around projects that work on empathy creation. And then finally, one very important point was raised around how intersectionality does not mean this plus this plus this plus this. It should not be an additive framework, but it should be about looking at gender, looking at masculinities, various different contexts and from various different lens. Having said that, whenever you adopt this lens, it must be from a lens that takes into account different kinds and different locations of social discrimination. And finally, when we spoke about intersectionality, we said feminism also has to look inwards, because feminism itself sometimes has its own limited gender lens. So I'll stop there and I'll pass on to Dalia, who will be summarizing the points for the third. Dalia, over to you.
Yeah. Thank you, Sapna. So in our group, we were mostly discussing about the challenges and the gaps of measuring the gender norms. So the three or four major points which came based on the discussion was like when we measure these gender norms, the gender stereotype norms, most of the time we end up of just addressing or even looking at non-risky behaviors like the changes, which is mostly at the household level, like engaging in the household chores or which is limited to that. But we never look, even one of the person who was sharing this experience was telling, even our modules are not prepared to work on the issues in a larger perspective, like sexuality and the other larger issues. So one of the points which we concluded was like the measurements are mainly on the peripheral issues, and we are not going deep into the larger gender norms. And another things which came is like especially when we talk about the masculinity. So most of the time we focused on boys and men. So she was also sharing her experience of engaging with the adolescent group in the school setting. So majority were boys, and then we won't get the voices of girls. So we really need to concentrate on the methodology as well as the research when we are conducting to include when we are working on the masculinity also beyond the men and boys. So another challenge or gap in the measurement is we don't have so much of long-term assessments and how the environment or the ecosystem of the people with whom we are working. So we always measure their individual changes, whether it's the attitude or behavior, but the ecosystem or the environment where they belong to and the societal pressure which they goes to when they reflect themselves on the changes. That is one of another lack of the issue which was coming up. These are the three major points from our team.
Thank you, Dalia. I think your voice was not very audible. I still hope everybody could hear it. Unfortunately, we don't have enough time for audience questions and perspectives. I hope there was some engagement in the chat group, and I would urge everyone to please do write to us. I will now take the last 4 minutes to hand over to our panelists, and if any of our panelists want to share some thoughts on some of the discussions that they were a part of, and I think we may not have time for concluding remarks. So on behalf of Kemlata, who was to address the concluding remarks, I just want to tell everybody that this framework is an ongoing work. It will be developed based on the inputs that we've received here today. We'll be reaching out to many of you, and we would really appreciate if you reach out to the ICRW and Nirantar team to share your thoughts. So over to the panelists. Any panelist wants to volunteer and share any thoughts on some of the discussions that we were having? Archana?
Yeah, just quickly, one is so glad, such a engaging discussion. I just want to flag just one or two small things. One is we are constantly saying masculinity in terms of everyone exercising power or using power to oppress other. So I feel this is a very limited idea of masculinity, the way we are looking at. And I'm not saying that I have any better idea, but I feel this is something which needs interrogation, just the use of power to oppress other person is that masculinity only. I mean, why masculinity gets seen in that way. And secondly, I also want to flag that we haven't discussed the linkages of masculinity with sexuality enough. And I feel sexuality is a very, very important aspect of understanding masculinity, and that needs much deeper engagement, which I hope we will do in future. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Archana. Yes, it's not only the language of oppression. We have to look at masculinities from various lens, how they are embodied in our daily lives, in our language, in how we occupy public spaces, in how we collaborate, in names, in the language of names, and so on and so forth. And also very important, the link between masculinities and sexuality. Any other panelists would like to say concluding remarks? Anything?
So, yeah, I just wanted to say that in our own framework, like as will be working further to bring the feminist evaluation approach within that to really help see how, like, one is about our own interpretation of what it means, different aspects of the framework, and then bringing the evaluation to ensure that the work that we are doing, how it's getting measured and evaluated, so that we have enough evidence to further incorporate and build in. So that's another thing that we need to really work on.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Pranita, for bringing up that point. I noticed one comment on the chat box that said, okay, we are only talking about challenges, challenges, challenges. Give me some solutions. So I think when we develop this framework, when we have to talk about how it can be used, we also have to talk about how this framework can be used and measured, and how this can be used for evaluation. So I think that's very, very important. That brings us to the 8:30 mark. Yes, Rituparna, these are very difficult discussions. And I think the important point is that we are having these conversations. And I think that we have to continue having these discussions. Thank you, everybody. And we are sorry time was not enough. We thought 2 hours was long enough. But we are very happy that some of you stayed with us till the end and engaged so much with us. We'll be in touch. Thank you so much. And there were some requests for translations of some of the work, some of the discussions by some panelists. We will reach out to you over email and share some translations. Thank you. Thank you so much, everyone. And thank you to our team members and men engaged. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you. Thank you to the panelists. Thank you. Moderators, note takers. Thank you all.
Thank you, everyone.
Thanks, Sapna.
Thanks.
Thank
Bye.
you, everyone.
Bye.
And congratulations.